became so lovely. Those bluest skies above me, those funny feelings I had never felt before I met you. I thought I'd stay a while. I tried to learn to smile. So many colors I had never even known. Maybe I'll find myself sitting on that distant shore. Maybe I'm not alone.
Greetings, fellow Crystal Gems, and welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking, the show where a geek can be a geek. As always, I am your host, Shaun, and this week I'm returning to an old favorite. But before we get there, let me just address a couple things. Yes, there will be spoilers for the recent big twist in Steven Universe. There will also be spoilers for the big twist at the end of Avengers Infinity War. I'm probably going to also touch on spoilers on a number of other things, but those will all be older, and frankly, if you need me to give you a spoiler warning for something like The Sixth Sense, for example, I got nothing for you. There are statutes and limitations to spoilers, boys and girls, and everything in between. Deal with it. Anyways, yes, so there'll be spoilers for Steven Universe, spoilers for Avengers, and this is a little bit different than what I normally do. This is a bit more video essay, I guess, than normal review, but as I'll get to in a second, that feels appropriate considering the subject matter. And hey, it's Mother's Day. As of when this is being posted originally, it's Mother's Day 2018 here in the US, and so it only feels appropriate that I discuss one mother of a twist. And in that same spirit, another horrible pun, the subject matter of that twist is appropriate because it's left me utterly shattered. Okay, I'm done. No more puns. I really could keep doing this all day. Let's get down to business. To defeat the Huns. God. So, if you don't know, if you go back and look in the archives, the very first episode of this show that I ever recorded included a review of Steven Universe, of the first episode of Steven Universe. So, my history with the series goes back to the beginning. I've been watching the show since the first episode, and I started Unrepentant Geeking, reviewing it. I also reviewed Adventure Time, and, for whatever that's worth, but regardless, yeah, so I love Steven Universe, and I've been a fan of the show. Again, if you go back to that first episode, right from the beginning, I was definitely somebody who has, from the start, believed in Steven. So, it feels right now that perhaps what is going to be the biggest twist, the biggest reveal, the biggest answer in the show's history has finally happened. That I address it, and I address my thoughts on it. And, yeah, probably won't be too big of a surprise that I love it. I think it's a great twist, and I'm going to explain why now. Okay, enough preamble, and I'm just going to assume that you are familiar with Steven Universe, otherwise, why on earth are you watching this video? Hey, if you want to keep watching and you've never seen Steven Universe before, I guess that's okay. I wouldn't recommend it, especially because, as I said, I'm about to get super spoiler heavy, but okay. So, yeah. As it turns out, one of the oldest major theories in the Steven Universe fandom is true. Rose Quartz is, in fact, Pink Diamond. The mother of Steven Universe has one hell of a secret in her history. One that, as it turns out, she's been keeping from almost everyone for the entirety of their time together. And while we have yet to see what's going to be the exact fallout of that secret finally being revealed, whew, boy, it's suffice to say that it's been contentious with the fandom, if nothing else. In Universe, and that's not a pun, and anytime I'm saying Universe in this, I am not making a pun, I promise, please, let's just move on. In Universe, it's clearly going to have huge ramifications, but outside of it, the fandom's been going nuts, and it's hard to blame them. As I said, people have been theorizing that Steven's mom was Pink Diamond before we even knew that Pink Diamond was a thing, before we even knew that diamonds were a thing. And you may be wondering how that's possible. People were theorizing that Steven's mom actually owned Pearl, or that she was some high-ranking official in whatever bureaucracy or whatever world existed for the Crystal Gems before they lived on Earth. And very early on, there were all sorts of little hints that there was a lot more that happened, that the world that we were watching and exploring, it wasn't just this fun cartoon, two-dimensional thing, that there was a lot going on in the background. And as the show has progressed, it's clear that a lot of that is dark and complicated and tricky. And so it only makes sense that one of the most important pieces of the entire Steven Universe puzzle reflects that. So, yeah, people have had this theory for a long time, but it was a theory that lost a lot of traction as the show has continued, as certain revelations have come out that seem to make it that wouldn't be possible. And yet some people have still clung to it, some people have clung to more crazy theories, but no, probably the first really big theory in the fandom has proven to be true. And as always happens with these kinds of things, reactions are mixed. Like I said, I have no problem with it, and I have no problem with it because of my feelings towards twist in general. And that's this. If your story can't survive people going into it knowing the twist, then in my opinion, I don't think it's a very good story. Now, yes, I'm sure there are exceptions out there, fine, but I'm speaking in generalities. And I also feel that most movies that people remember for the twist have a lot more going on than just that twist. Perhaps the most famous, the example, especially in more recent times, is The Sixth Sense. It's a movie that's infamous for its twist, and so infamous that it basically pigeonholed its director into doing movies with twists. And unfortunately, he didn't learn the lesson that he himself apparently knew when he made it, because The Sixth Sense is a really good movie, whether or not you know the twist. If you do know it, it still works really well. A matter of fact, when I first saw The Sixth Sense, I guessed the big twist within the first couple minutes of the movie. To me, it was glaringly obvious. And yet I still loved it. The fact that I saw it coming didn't negate my enjoyment. And I'm not claiming to be some sort of super genius here, but that's because The Sixth Sense works, whether or not you know that. In fact, like all great twists, what knowing the twist does is recontextualize things. See, that, in my opinion, is the best kind of plot twist. It's not just something done for the sake of shock value. Shock for shock's sake. That is rarely, if ever, a good idea. No, The Sixth Sense works just as well if you know what's going on. As a matter of fact, if you've only ever seen the movie once, or if it's been a long time since you've seen it, I recommend go rewatching it. It really does hold up. And rewatch it specifically keeping the twist in mind, and you'll see that the movie plays completely fair, that it doesn't cheat its own rules, that it sets up rules and it sticks to them, that at no point does it have to, nudge, nudge, wink, wink the audience. Like, if you want to know a twist that I don't think is a good example of this kind of twist, to me a great example of that would be Fight Club, because I personally feel Fight Club has to cheat the wazoo to make its twist work. And it has to cheat in a way that feels, to me, dubious. You could make some arguments that some of the cheats they do could theoretically work with the character's condition, but come on, we're already in an exaggerated version of reality, and that's not even remotely how it works. So no, you're just cheating for cheating's sake. You're doing this in a way that deliberately, your twist only really works if you completely cheat. If you lie to the audience in a way that, in my opinion, isn't quote-unquote fair. That you don't stick to the rules you set up. Now, of course, there's something to be said for an unreliable narrator and all that kind of thing. I'm just giving an example why I don't think the twisted Fight Club is all that good. I've got other problems with Fight Club as a movie, and not least of which the way people have not gotten the fact that it's a criticism, not a support. But okay, this is not the topic at hand. The thing is, a good plot twist is even harder to pull off in an ongoing, serialized medium. I'll give you a good example. There was a DC comic event many years back. It was something they did in their annuals called Armageddon 2001. The idea was there's a character who's a time traveler and has the ability to look into people's futures whenever he touches them. And he comes from this dark future where this guy called Monarch rules with an iron fist, the typical evil overlord kind of thing. And all he knows is that Monarch was originally a hero. He doesn't know who he was, but he's now gained time travel powers, and so he's decided to go back in time and kill Monarch or stop Monarch before he takes over the world. So the whole event is basically him going around touching different people and watching their potential alternate futures. So it's basically just an excuse for the writers to be able to tell a bunch of fun, out-of-continuity, no rules matter stories. But the reveal of what hero it was going to be. Now, this was long before the days of the internet really being the big thing that it is now. yet somehow still the reveal got leaked. And so the majority of the hardcore readers went into it knowing or thinking they knew who the bad guy was going to turn out to be. And instead of just going along with it, DC Comics made the dumb decision to change it. They decided to change who Monarch's actual identity was going to be, and they did it at the last minute. And they did it in a way that completely undercuts everything that the story was building up to that point. The original hero was a B-list character, but one who had gained some prominence in recent years, in part because they knew they were going towards this, and for other reasons. He was a B-lister, but he was a solid B-lister. He was somebody who going evil and being lost in that way would have some impact. The replacement choice was a C, maybe even D-lister, that nobody basically gave a damn about. And so it had absolutely no impact, and audiences just rolled their eyes, and it undercut the thematic elements of the story, and it was a debacle, and it was a great example of why you don't just do things for the sake of doing them. That you need to have more than just that, especially if your twist is impacting a long-form story that's been going on for years in multiple discrete chunks. That's the trickiest thing to do, because you have audience investment and you don't want to risk losing it. It's one thing to get a plot twist that upends everything in a 2-hour movie. Well, at the end of the day, it's 2 hours, you've committed to it. It's another thing when you get a plot twist that upends a show that's been on the air for 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, whatever number of years. Or that's been a comic book that's been going on for years and years. That's why the big plot twist in comics can be a risk. Look at what happened when Marvel tried their whole Captain America thing recently with Secret Empire. Whatever you think of the story itself, it clearly didn't resonate with a lot of readers. Now, I can't say in the longer term how people are ultimately going to feel about the Rose Quartz being Pink Diamond twist. Not least of which because there's still a lot we need to know. There are still a bunch of missing pieces to this. But I can say that as of right now, I think the twist works really well. And I think it does because, like I said, it's resonant. It has thematic resonance with the overall arcing themes of the series itself. Steven Universe has always been a show about optimism, about characters getting second chances, about people coming together and forming a family, and you, through that family, overcoming impossible odds, standing up in the face of that. And all of this plays well into this narrative twist that, as it turns out, there's a lot more to Rose Quartz than we thought. And another major theme has been Steven coming to terms with. At the start of the series, he clearly had this super idyllic vision of Rose Quartz in his head. Naturally enough, because everybody, his father and the other Crystal Gems and everybody who knew his mother, they just talked her up. They basically all but worshipped her. And no wonder he built her up in his head. This incredible figure who he never actually met, who he could never meet by the nature of his birth. This character who everybody talks about in hushed awe. No wonder he thinks and sees her as perfect. There's a great line. There's one of the first big climaxes for the series is a bunch of what are called homeworld gems coming back, and if you know the show, you know what I'm talking about, and capturing Steven and the other gems, and basically showcasing to Steven for the first time that this isn't a game, that there are real consequences. The show dabbled with that here and there, had made references to the fact that, no, actually, there used to be a lot more crystal gems, and no, there were a lot of bad things that came out of the war, and no, this is dangerous. And in the aftermath of that, Steven sings a song, and there's a specific line, everybody told me gem stuff was dangerous, I didn't believe them, or something to that effect. And it's a great line, because it's clear that Steven has really had his innocence broken by this. While they come out technically winning by surviving, in some ways this is the first real loss Steven experiences because he can't save everybody. Because the gems, basically other gems make terrible choices and he can't convince them to do those choices. And while they live, there's clearly consequences. And Steven is somebody who at this point is still very naive and still very optimistic, and he struggles in the aftermath of that, holding on to that optimism in the weight of the reality of the dangers and the costs and the consequences. And from that point on, the show just drills down deeper and deeper into that, as the consequences of everything that his mother did become more and more immediate. Become more and more apparent to him, and it also becomes apparent to Steven that while his mother apparently had these ideals, she probably at some various points broke those ideals. She broke with them. She did things that she and he would both consider bad for the greater good. And that's always hard. Basically, it's something that I think most kids have to come to terms with eventually, sooner or later, be it in childhood or even in adulthood. Be it via a parent or a teacher or a family friend. At some point or another, most of us have to confront the fact that an adult in our life is not the perfect figure we've built them up to be. That they are just as fallible, just as weak, just as messed up as we are. And then you have to face the fact that that's true for adults in general. That you don't just turn 18, that you don't just magically become an adult and suddenly have all the answers. That everybody is struggling, everybody's trying to figure out who they are, and it's a process that never really stops for the entirety of your life. When you're a kid, you do see adults, especially these days, especially in the modern age. You see adulthood as this practically another country that one day you'll get to enter, and then you'll know everything, and you'll have all the answers, and of course, you don't and you won't. And while there's lots of characters and stories, and just basically a lot going on in Steven Universe in general, it's not an accident that the show is called Steven Universe. He is the central character of this series. And unquestionably, his central arc is the classic coming of age. It's the classic growing up. Indeed, in the build-up to these episodes, the preceding episodes give us a number of storylines where we are reminded of just how much Steven has grown up. Just how much he has gone through since the start of the show, and how he really is a changed person. He's no longer the ridiculously innocent child that he once was. He's still ultimately optimistic. He still believes in the best in people. He still believes in redemption and hope and all that, but it's been tempered now by reality. And it's basically he's had to weather a number of storms, and that's why I think they had to wait until this point to do the big twist with Rose. Like, I've seen a number of people complain that they should have done this sooner, but I don't think from a thematic, from a character perspective, I don't think you could have done that and had Steven reacted the same way. It would have had to be a lot more impactful. You would have had to basically strip the show of what it was at its core for a significant period of time to realistically have Steven react in a way that didn't just completely be at odds with his character. This is a gigantic reveal. It's a reveal that changes everything. It just changes everything, both in plot terms, in character terms, in every possible way you can imagine. It recontextualizes the entire series. It has huge impact on the way we watch it, and it's going to have huge impact on everything going forward. Clearly, this is going to be central to whatever the final plotline of this current storyline, or even maybe the series is. And clearly, this is going to upend so much for the characters themselves. We get a brief preview of the next set of episodes, and we're already starting to see the fallout, and it's clearly going to be intense. And so, this is arguably the biggest pivot point in the entire series. There are other big moments, there are other big episodes, there are other big reveals, but this is the one more than any other that where you could probably divide the show into pre this and post this. This is the one that really does, and this is such an overused term, and I've already used it several times myself in this, but this really does change everything. And in order for Steven to be in a place where he can accept it in a way where clearly he's going to need to, because I think it's pretty obvious, while he's still going to be processing the fallout himself, he's going to have to reach out and help the others as well. He needs to have gone through some other stuff first. He needs to have gone through a number of journeys and learned a number of lessons. And I don't think this is going to break Steven in the way it might have. This isn't going to make a pun in reference to the show's terminology, shatter him like it would have. Like if Steven in the first season had learned this, he wouldn't have even been able to, he probably would have just started going, and we would have seen like smoke coming out of his head, and he probably would have just become like a drooling vegetable for several months, because it would have been too much to handle. Well, I don't know, maybe, or he wouldn't have understood because he didn't know what diamonds were. Fine. If he'd learned this earlier, regardless, he couldn't have handled it. I think the show's going to show us that now he can. And he's now in a position to do what he's been doing for some time, which is to be the actual leader of the Crystal Gems. Not just in the sense of giving orders in battle, but being the heart and soul, being the one who helps hold the others up, who helps the others keep going when they think they can't. And I also like it because I think it's such an interesting one, potentially from a character perspective. A lot of people have talked about how this was an obvious twist. And I've spent all this time talking about twist in general, because, okay, yeah, so what? That doesn't matter. What matters is, does this open storytelling possibilities? And it really does. Like, a lot of people may have guessed this twist, but I'll tell you, I don't remember seeing anybody guess. And if I'm wrong, fine, I'm sure somebody did. It wouldn't surprise me. But I don't think in general the fandom or people in general thought that Garnet didn't know. And boy, doesn't that change a lot of things. Like, a recent episode, the one that started out this current block of episodes, is Garnet going and telling a bunch of other characters the history of the crystal gems, the history of rose quartz. And now we know that history, to some degree or another, is a lie. Maybe completely a lie. And you see the way she draws strength from it, and she uses it to inspire others to realize that the foundation of who you are, in Garnet's case, literally who she is, literally the foundation of her existence, is a lie. It's difficult to express in words what that would do to someone. Even someone as old and seemingly wise as Garnet. I'm also not bothered because, again, I've seen some people go, well, clearly this means Rose was evil, and this is because Rose is evil, and this ruins the show, and of course it doesn't, and of course she isn't. I mean, maybe that's where they're going. I suppose theoretically in an infinite universe filled with infinite possibilities, that could technically exist. But I will bet any one of you $100 that's not going to be the case. And that's because, again, you have to view this twist in the context of the series as a whole. And as I said earlier, this is a show about optimism. This is a show about second chances. This is a show about redemption. And we also have to keep in mind that we don't know the whole story yet. And that we've never really seen Rose from in her own words. We've only ever really seen Rose from other people's perspectives. But even allowing for that, there's some interesting degrees of nuance. A lot of people, I also think, are jumping to the wrong conclusion because we only recently really got to see, quote-unquote, Pink Diamond in the flesh, quote-unquote, for the first time very recently. And what we saw of her was clearly a long time ago, before she'd gotten Earth as a colony. And she is very much a brat in when we see her. She's immature, she's inexperienced, she's lacking in knowledge, and she's got a temper on her, and she's super impulsive. And yeah, that absolutely fits and tracks with both what we know of the Diamonds in general, what we know of Pink Diamond, and what we know of Rose. Again, going back to another episode, one of my favorite episodes is The Answer, which gives us the origin of Garnet. And there's a great line when Garnet first actually meets Rose near the end of the episode, where Rose basically says to the effect of, oh, who cares about me? I want to know about you. And we've seen that reinforced and echoed a number of times in various flashbacks when we've gotten to see Rose. It's clear that to some degree or another, Rose is driven by a desire for new experiences, and she loves the idea of seeing something new. That's why she loves the Earth, because the Earth is a planet filled with endless new things, endless new possibilities. It's not the static world of the gems, of the diamonds and all that. It's this world where everything is happening and where life is brief but beautiful and potent, and change is constantly around the corner. And it's not hard to see perhaps why Rose, as Pink Diamond, fell in love with this world. And she is clearly, to some degree or another, a very impulsive creature, and this episode reinforces that. It's not an accident that Pearl says to Rose, this will change everything, and Rose's response is, I know, isn't it exciting? To me, I think one of the biggest flaws of Rose, of Pink Diamond, whatever you want to call her, is going to turn out to be that, yes, she doesn't always think about the consequences. And that has often very painful results. And we see the ultimate painful result, where her failure to think of consequences causes almost the entirety of this army she's leading to be wiped out or corrupted. And that at the end, only the three of them remain, and then eventually they recruit a fourth one who they find. And we've seen the impact that had on Garnet, and we've seen the impact that had on Pearl. We've never directly seen the impact it had on Rose, but if you think it didn't, I respectfully disagree. I think we're about to find out that no, that had a massive impact on Rose. Now, it's possible it's going to turn out Rose is a sociopath and she just doesn't care. But I think while there's clearly a lot going on with Rose, especially like in the big reveal scene, I do think she does mean a lot of what she's saying. There's debate right now, for instance, is she manipulating Pearl? Is she using Pearl? Is she just telling Pearl what she wants to hear? I think on some level, yes, but I think it may be a subconscious thing. I don't think she's necessarily consciously doing it, because as I said, I don't think Rose, especially at this point, thinks about the consequences of her actions. She is spoiled, and so she's never had to really face that. She's only ever had to face minor consequences at best. That's why the flashback we get or dream, or whatever you want to call it, in the previous episode is so important to what is to come. We see her getting reprimanded by the other Diamonds, but it's all just a slap on the wrist, and it's just them treating her very parentistically, very much like the child that it seems like she is, regardless of her actual age. And I very much think that we're going to discover that Rose was changed by the end of the war, by the consequences. She thought that if she faked her own death, the rest of the Diamonds would just leave. They'd just go, oh, well, without Pink, there's nothing we can do. Let's get back to work and go find another colony. And Pink would just be free to frolic around Earth with all of her friends as Rose and never have to deal with any of the fallout. And I think we're going to find out that a lot of because we don't know exactly why Pink decided to become Rose and what led her to do all this in the first place. And I do think it's going to turn out to be, to some degree, a very impulsive decision. I absolutely am convinced of that. But I do think it's going to be because, to some degree or another, Pink falls in love, even if she doesn't entirely understand it or know why, with Earth, and she doesn't want to do the thing that she needs to do, which is tell the other Diamonds, no, I think this is wrong, let's not do this, this planet is special, maybe even our entire way of living is wrong. She can't bring herself to confront them like that, because on some level she knows the consequences would be severe, so she tries to do it roundabout way. She tries to get what she wants without having to pay for it. And in the end, she does pay for it in the worst way possible, and it probably comes as a complete shock to her because she isn't used to dealing with consequences. And where I draw this from is specifically the later flashbacks we've gotten, the series of flashbacks we've gotten from Greg's perspective, Mr. Universe's perspective, of his romance with Rose and his life with Rose in the lead-up to the birth of Steven. You can see, I think, subtle alterations in Rose that reflect that to some degree she has learned, probably very painfully, that her actions have consequences, and she does at least try to take some consideration. She initially rebuffs Greg's attempts at romance because she knows she's immortal and he isn't, and she doesn't really even necessarily understand what love is at that point, not romantic love, and I'll get back to that in a second. And she just thinks he'll be wasting his life. And she doesn't want him to do that. She wants him to go out and be happy, and she doesn't want for her... She would be happy to play with him, as she initially puts it. It'd be really fun for her. It'd be something new and fresh. I mean, she's clearly had any number of romances in the past, but I also suspect it's been a while, and yes, it would just be fun. It'd be something new. But she stops and goes, no, I can't do this. I can't have fun at his expense because he's mortal, he's human, and he's only got this very short time of life, and I want him to go out and live it to the fullest. And I think that's very telling. Now, that doesn't mean that Rose, of course, perfectly understands humans either. In a later flashback episode, when Greg is babysitting, we do see that Rose still doesn't quite get humans, but none of the Gems do. And that's something that you have to understand is, at the end of the day, the Gems are aliens. And I know that sounds very obvious, but no, they are aliens, and not just in the sense that they're from another planet, because after all, technically Amethyst is from Earth. She was born on Earth. But no, they are not human. They are an alien life form. And while they take forms that resemble humans, and while they are able to, on some level, relate to us, while they're not completely alien, while there is clearly some common ground between the Gems and humanity, ultimately, they have a perspective that is separate and different from us, and it does not come naturally to them to see the world or think about things the way we do. Look at Garnet. Garnet is an amazing romance, but in her, romance means that the two beings, or whatever, in this case, the two beings who make up the romance, in a sense, give up their own existence to become a new third existence, And they're not horrified or bothered by that, because to them, it's not something terrible. It's something wonderful and beautiful and even natural, even if nobody else sees it that way. And one of the things I appreciate so much about Steven Universe is the way, in so many subtle ways, and not so subtle, but in a lot of subtle ways, it reinforces the alienness of the crystal gems. That, and it's especially great because when the show starts out, you just think it's just being played for humor. You just think it's just cheap jokes, and you realize there's a deeper meaning behind that behavior. Yes, it is to be funny, but there's more to it than just that. There is a reasonable, intelligent, logical thing behind why they act and think this way. And on some level, we can't fully understand them any more than they can fully understand us. And so we can't just view Rose as we would a person. There is a difference. So I do believe that, yes, ultimately we're going to see that Rose has grown. Now, did she ever completely grow out of her selfishness? Maybe not. I mean, you would think she could have told other people things. And that's also, by the way, a lot of people have made something not unfairly about her final order to Pearl, to never talk about it, and she clearly wasn't thinking about what that might do to Pearl. Because, again, Rose doesn't think about consequences. And Rose absolutely has no idea what's coming. Rose 100% believes that if she shatters herself or pretends to shatter herself, everything's going to be fine. That's the only way to win, even. That's, again, we get that reinforced in that flashback dream we get in the previous episode. As long as Rose is there as a figurehead, the other Diamonds say that Earth will remain a colony. So, of course, that's almost certainly the moment. That is the moment, I bet, when Pink Diamond, the Rose, had the idea to pretend to shatter herself. So she doesn't think there's going to be any negative consequences. She just doesn't want to talk about it because she never wants to face her past and she never wants to face consequences. Now, does that mean that we're still going to have more painful truths about Rose? Absolutely. We still don't entirely know why she ultimately decided to give up her own existence to give birth to Steven. Because it's very clear, the show has been very clear to establish, Steven is his own entity. This is not just a case like with Garnet, where Ruby and Sapphire on some level are still there. They're still existing. They could still stop being Garnet if they wanted to. Rose is dead. She's dead. At least as far as we know. I don't think they're going to change that. Steven is not Rose. By which, I mean, he's not just like Rose with amnesia or something like that. He is a distinct being from her. And it's clear she knew that was going to happen. She was essentially dying to give birth to him. Now, Steven himself, in one very potent episode, confronted an image of his mother screaming about how did you just give birth to me so you didn't have to face the consequences of what you did. And there may be some truth to that. And if that's the only reason why, yes, then Rose is a monster and she's terrible. But I suspect that the show is going to play fair to what we've seen before, and that no, like with a lot of things in life, there were many reasons that Rose ultimately did what she did. And that applies as much to the whole rebellion and to pretend to shatter herself as it does to giving birth to Steven. Look, there's still a lot to unpack, and there's still a lot to discover. There's still definite mysteries out there and questions to be answered. It's too soon to be able to make any kind of definite decision, I guess, in whether or not Rose is an unmitigated monster. Clearly, Rose made a lot of mistakes. She did a lot of things that she regrets, and everything she should have regretted that she probably didn't. She's complicated. So is everybody else on this show. Every single major character in this show has done terrible things to varying degrees at various points. Even Steven. Oh God. No, I don't mean that. Steven has made mistakes that had painful consequences for his friends and family. And if he didn't, for example, have an ass pull of a power, and that's not an insult, I'm just, if he didn't manage to pull out one hell of a Deus Ex Machina, for example, one of his friends would be dead. And he didn't think it through. He clearly shares some of that with his mother. But you also can see in that example, he went into it with good intentions. But he didn't think it through, partially because he didn't have time, but also because he didn't think it through the consequences. And I'm excited to see the show deal with the fallout. I'm excited to see where we go from here. I'm more in love with it than ever, and I really do think, I have zero doubts they're going to stick the landing with this. So, I understand some people don't like it, and if you don't, that's fine, that's fair, I respect it. I would say, my eyes do roll a bit when I see people getting a little bit down into the nuts and bolts, like, well, her gem wouldn't actually look like that when it turns, and I'm like, even if that's true, at some point you do have to engage in a bit of suspension of disbelief. And if you really want a hand-waved explanation, I could come up with one easily. Like, for instance, she's shape-shifting, so maybe she's changing her flesh around the gem a bit so it alters the look of it. She's a diamond, and she can do all sorts of incredible things. I would just say, let's give the show a chance. I think at this point, Steven Universe has more than earned the benefit of the doubt. And I think if you go back and you watch some of these earlier episodes, you will see that they've been setting this up all along, that they've played fair with the audience, and I think they're going to continue to. And I'm just beyond even plot mechanics in terms of character and emotion and all that, I just found it so satisfying. And I can't wait to see what's next for Steven Universe. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. Stay tuned later this month for reviews of Star Wars Last Shot, Deadpool 2, and Strange Journey Redux for the 3DS, which is the re-release of the interesting DS Shin Megami Tensei game. So all that is to come in May, and then next month, since I tackled Mother's Day this time, it seems only fair to give dads their chance. So this Father's Day, I'll be examining fatherhood by way of God of War. Please look forward to that. So, for Unrepentant Geeking, this is Shaun Cronenfeld wishing you all long days and pleasant nights. Till next time.